All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be doing a video on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Going to be doing a series of these. We'll see how far we get with the first one. Um, you may want to skip ahead here and there to whichever chapters your class is reading, as I'm only doing one version of these recordings for Sir Gawain. So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is one of the two most famous medieval romances in the English language. The other one being Le Morte d'Arthur, which has a French title, but is still written in English. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is not so much about the adventures of King Arthur and his entire court as it is about one specific person, King Arthur's nephew, Gawain. Now, Gawain is a character that pops up in a lot of Arthurian stories, but he's different in every story he appears. In this story, he's a young and inexperienced knight. In other stories, he might be an older and very experienced knight. They change him up for every story he's in for some reason. Here, he is a young and inexperienced knight, the least of King Arthur's court. And he feels that he only got his position because his uncle's the king. And he wants a chance to prove himself. And of course, the story is going to give him a chance to prove himself. In more ways than one, it's going to test him. So, where our story begins is actually the distant past, because a lot of stories, epics, like to show that their people came from a mighty history of other mighty peoples. It's going to sort of skim over how, according to mythology, Troy was defeated and its survivors founded Rome, and how Rome sent out people to found England. It's quite possible that none of this happened, or some of it. It is the mythical origins of England and a story to show that England came from Troy and Rome, other mighty warrior cultures. Eventually, we'll get to the present day with King Arthur's court after a couple of chapters here. And I say chapters, but these are actually very brief chapters. So beginning with part 1, chapter 1. When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flames to firebrands and ashes, the traitor, who the contrivance of treason there fashioned, was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred, who then laid under them lands, and lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the Western Isles. When royal Romulus to Rome had rode, his road had taken, in great pomp and pride, he peopled it first and named it with his own name, that yet now it bears. Tyrius went to Tuscany and towns founded, Langobard in Lombardy uplifted halls, and far over the French flood Felix Brutus on many a broad bank and brae of Britain established full fair, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each of grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. Notice here that this is definitely in verse, in poetry, and that unlike Beowulf, that only used alliteration and kennings, this also adds a bit of rhyme at the end of each chapter, where the line goes very short and then we get a four-line stanza. That poetic technique is called the bob and wheel. You don't see it very often, but that's what it's called. Maybe it was more popular back then. But we're finally adding rhyme to our poetry in British literature here. All right, chapter 2. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, bold men were bred there, who in battle rejoiced, and many a name that betide they troubles aroused. In this domain more marvels have men been seen than in any other that I know of since the olden time. But of all that here abode in Britain as kings, ever was Arthur most honored, as I have heard men tell. Wherefore a marvel among men I mean to recall, a sight strange to see, some men have held it, one of the wildest adventures of the wonders of Arthur. If you will listen to this lay but a little while now, I will tell it at once as it was told in town, as I have heard it told in town. As it is fixed and fettered, in story brave and bold, thus linked and truly lettered, as was loved in the land of old. Notice how the narrator is drawing attention to himself, saying I a lot, and saying that he heard this story once in town, which suggests that he's not making it up, that it's been passed down, that this story has a history of some kind. Now, scholars say that the author probably did make the story up, actually. There's no other record of this particular exact story of Gawain anywhere else but this book. So, yeah, that's just laying on a layer of fictional history to this story. Though there are pieces that have been borrowed from other legends. Some pieces were borrowed from the Irish hero Cuchulainn story, which we unfortunately did not have time to cover this semester. But if you ever want to read Cuchulainn of Muirthemne, you might run into a part of that story that's similar to a part of this one. But moving on. Chapter 3. This king lay at Camelot at Christmas tide, with many a lovely lord, lieges most noble, indeed of the Table Round, all those tried brethren, amid merriment unmatched and mirth without care. There tourneyed many a time the trusty knights, and jousted full joyously these gentle lords. For there the feast was unfailing full 15 days, with all meats and all mirth that men could devise, such gladness and gaiety as was glorious to hear. Din of voices by day and dancing by night, all happiness at the highest in halls and in bowers, had the lords and the ladies such as they loved most dearly. With all the bliss of this world they abode together, the knights most renowned after the name of Christ, and the ladies most lovely that ever life enjoyed, and he king most courteous, who that lord possessed, for all that folk so fair did in their first estate abide, under heaven the first in fame, their king most high in pride. It would now be hard to name a troop in war so tried. So we come to the present day setting of our story. We heard the historical origins of England. Now we're at King Arthur's court, Christmas time, and there they celebrate Christmas for 15 days of partying. So it extends well into New Year's as well. Lots and lots of partying, food, drink, games, fun stuff. While New Year was yet young, that yester eve had arrived. That day double dainties on the dais were served. When the king was there, come with his courtiers to the hall, and the chanting of the choir in the chapel had ended. With loud clamor and cries, both clerks and laymen, Noel announced anew, and named it full often. Then nobles ran anon with New Year gifts. Hansels, Hansels, they shouted, and handed them out. Competed for those presents in playful debate. Ladies laughed loudly, though they lost the game, and he that won was not woeful, as may well be believed. All is merriment they made, till their meat was served. Then they washed and mannerly went to their seats, ever the highest for the worthiest, as was held to be best. Queen Guinevere the gay was with grace in the midst, and of the adorned dais set. Dearly was it arrayed, finest sandal at their sides, a ceiling above her of true tissue of Toulouse and tapestries of Tharsia that were embroidered and embound with the brightest gems. One might prove and appraise to purchase for coin any day. That loveliest lady there on them glanced with eyes of grey. That he found evermore one fair, in sooth, might no man say. So the author describes more of the party, of all the luxurious food and drink, the games. Apparently there are presents and a game where a guy might go around with something in his hands and the lady would have to guess what's in his hands. I don't remember whether they win or lose. Somehow they end up sharing a kiss. It's either if they win or lose, but I can't remember which one, honestly. But some sort of game they played back then. And talks about how pretty Queen Guinevere is. Moving along. But Arthur, chapter 5. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. His youth made him so merry with his moods, the moods of a boy. He liked light-hearted life, so loved he the less, either long to be lying or long to be seated, so worked on him his young blood and wayward brain, that another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed, it pleased him not to eat upon festival so fair ere he first were apprised, of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in of noble men, knighthood, of new adventures. Hold on just a moment. Okay, Mrs. Valentine was making faces at me there just a moment ago. Where was I? Of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures, or a challenger should come a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against him, each allowing the other the favor of fortune. Were she fairer to him, this was the king's custom wherever his court was holden, at each famous feast among his fair company in hall. So his face doth proud appear, and he stands up stout and tall, all young in the new year, much mirth he makes withal. So basically, King Arthur will not eat his dinner until two conditions have been met. One, everyone else has been served, so he's a good host. And two, he wants to be entertained. He wants to hear a tale of adventure. And since back then, tales of knights going on adventures were medieval romances, he basically wants to hear the type of story that we're reading right now. He wants to hear a medieval romance in his medieval romance. It's medieval romanceception. But moving along. Chapter 6. Thus there stands up straight the stern king himself, talking before the high table of trifles courtly. There good... Hold on, just a moment again. There good Gawain was set at Guinevere's side, with Agravain a la Dormain, that is, of the hard hand, on the other side seated. Both their lords, sisters, sons, loyal-hearted knights, Bishop Baldwin had the honor of the board service, and Iwain, Urien's son, ate beside him. These dined on the dais and daintily fared, and many a loyal lord below at the long tables. Then forth came the first course with fanfare of trumpets, on which many bright banners bravely were hanging. You know that's how you want your dinner to be announced. Everyone just burst out with trumpets. Do, dinner time. Or each course of dinner, actually, so several trumpet fanfares, on which many bright banners bravely were hanging, noise of drums then anew, and the noble pipes, warbling wild and keen, wakened their music, so that many hearts rose high hearing their play. Then forth was brought a feast, fair of the noblest, multitude of fresh meats, on so many dishes that free places were few in front of the people, to set the silver things, full of soups on cloth so white. Each lord of his liking there, without lack took delight, 12 plates to every pair, good beer and wine all bright. So just so you are sure of how luxurious and rich this party is, 12 plates to every pair. So there were 6 full plates of food to choose from in front of every one person. That's a lot of food. But it is a royal party, so it has to be the best. Chapter 7. Now of their service I will say nothing more. We're done just describing how great the party is. For you are all well aware that no want would there be. Another noise that was new drew near on a sudden, so that their lord might have leave at last to take his food, which means we're going to hear some story of adventure, something entertaining. Something is going to happen. For hardly had the music but a moment ended, and the first course in the court as custom had been served, when there passed through the portals a perilous horseman, the mightiest on middle earth in measure of height, from his gorge to his girdle so great and so square, and his loins and his limbs so long and so huge, that half a troll upon earth I trow that he was. But the largest man alive, at least I declare him, and yet the seemliest for his size that could sit on a horse. For though in back and in breast his body was grim, both his paunch and his waist were properly slight, and all his features followed his fashion so gay and mode. For at the hue men gaped aghast, in his face and form that showed, as a fey man fell he passed, and green all over glowed. So notice the description of the guy that interrupts their party. He's huge, half a troll in height, very burly and muscular. They're going to describe how he has a very big beard and hair, a very bushy beard, and Trait that stands out the most is that he is green. Very, very green. We're going to find out just how green he is in the next few chapters. But for a visual here, picture Hagrid from Harry Potter, but green. A green Hagrid that's a little more irritable and with glowing red eyes for some reason. But that might give you a good image here of what the Green Knight looks like. Not as just a moment. Okay, we're back. All of green were they made, both garments and man, a coat tight and close that clung to his sides, a rich robe above it all arrayed within, with fur finely trimmed, showing fair fringes, of handsome ermine gay, as his hood was also, that was lifted from his locks and laid on his shoulders, and trim hose, tight drawn, of tincture alike, that clung to his calves, and clear spurs below, of bright gold on silk. What are you looking at me like that for? Sorry, Mrs. Valentine is making faces at me again, moving right along. So the point here is that the Green Knight is not dressed in armor for war. He is dressed in luxurious furs and robes. Suggests that he's here to party. He's here for luxury, for comfort, not for battle. Furs with gold on them, apparently, of bright gold on silk broideries banded most richly. Though unshod were his shanks, for shoeless he rode. And verily all this vesture was of verdure clear, verdure being another word for green, verdant fields, green fields. Anyway, both the bars on his belt and bright stones besides that were richly arranged in his saddle, in his array so fair. Set on himself and on his saddle both silk fabrics, it would be too hard to rehearse one half of the trifles that were embroidered upon them, what with the birds and the flies and the gay glory of green, and ever gold in the midst, the pendants of his poitrel, his proud crupper. You don't need to know these terms. These are parts of his clothing. They had lots of clothing terms back then. His molanes and all the metal, to say more, were enameled. Even the stirrups that he stood in were stained of the same, and his saddle bows and suit, and their sumptuous skirts, which ever glimmered and glinted all with green jewels. Even the horse that upheld him, in hue, was the same, I tell. A green horse, great and thick, a stallion stiff to quell. Embroidered bridle quick, he matched his master well. Long story short, he's green. He's very green. Everything about him is green. And his horse is green, and his clothing's green, and it's all green. But just in case you weren't sure what's weird about this guy, Chapter 9. Very gay was this great man guised all in green, and the hair of his head with the horses accorded. Fair flapping locks enfolded his shoulders, a big beard like a bush over his breast hanging, that with the handsome hair from his head falling with sharp shorn to an edge, just short of his elbows, so that half his arms under it were hid, as it were in a king's carapace that encloses his neck. The name of that mighty horse was of much the same sort, well curled. I think that was a typo. The mane of that mighty horse was much of the same sort. Well curled and all combined, with many curious knots woven in with gold wire about the wondrous green. Ever a strand of the hair and the string of gold, the tail and the top lock were entwined all to match, and both bound with a band of bright, brilliant green, with dear jewels bedight to the docks ending. And twisting then on top was a tight knitted knot, on which many burnished bells of bright gold jingled. With such amount on middle earth of man to ride him was never beheld in that hall, with eyes ere that time for there. His glance was as lightning bright, so did all that saw him swear. No man could. So he gazes at them with glowing red eyes and strikes fear into their hearts. And they look at his muscles and how huge he is and think, no one's going to be able to take a punch from that guy. No one's going to be able to take a hit from that guy. Hopefully we don't have to fight him. But after he finishes staring them down, and yet he had not a helm, nor a hauberk either. That means he has no armor on. No, not a pisaine, not a plate that was proper to arms, not a shield, not a shaft for shock or for blow. So no armor, no spear, no sword, no shield. Showing us what he doesn't have is very important because it shows his intentions. But notice what's in his hands. This is very important. But in his one hand he held a holly bundle that is greatest in greenery when groves are leafless, and an axe in the other, ugly and monstrous, a ruthless weapon aright for one in rhyme to describe. The head was as large and as long as an ell-wand, a branch of green steel and of beaten gold, the bit burnished bright and broad at the edge, as well shaped for shearing as sharp razors. The stem was a stout staff by which sternly he gripped it, all bound with iron about to the base of the handle, and engraven in green in graceful patterns, lapped round with a lanyard that was lashed to the head, and down the length of the haft was looped many times, and tassels of price were tied there in plenty, to bosses of the bright green, braided most richly. Such was he that now hastened, in the hall entering, pressed forward to the dais. No peril he feared, to none gave he greeting, gazing above them, and the first word that he whinged, "Now where is," he said, "the governor of this gathering? For gladly would I on the same set my sight, and with himself now talk in town." On the courtiers he cast his eye, and rolled it up and down. He stopped and stared to espy who there had most renown. Now notice there are definitely two layers to what the Green Knight is saying here. One, he, on the surface, asks to see their leader. That seems like a pretty straightforward request. But two, he's saying, "Where is your king? Show him to me, for I do not see him. I don't see anybody that looks like a king." Now, this place would have had the dais at the front, the raised platform, with a very special seat of honor for the king to sit, with a crown and everything. It would have been obvious who the king was. The Green Knight saying this is basically a veiled insult, saying, "I don't see a king. You're going to have to show him to me." That's how he chooses to start this conversation. Notice also our story begins with a king having a dinner party to celebrate and being interrupted by a magical being. Kind of parallel to a book we've already read in Unit 1. But moving on. Chapter 11. Then they looked for a long while on that lord gazing, for every man marveled what it could mean indeed, that horseman and horse such a hue should come by, to grow green as the grass, and greener it seemed than green enamel on gold, glowing far brighter. All stared that stood there and stole up nearer, watching him and wondering what in the world he would do. For many marvels they had seen, but to match this, nothing. Wherefore a phantom and fey magic folk they thought it. And so to answer little eager was any of those knights, and astounded at his stern voice, stone still they sat there, in a swooning silence through that solemn chamber, as if all had dropped into a dream, so died their voices away. Not only I deem for dread, but for some 'twas their courtly way, to allow their lord and head to this guest his word to say. This is a good time to note that in this day and age, in this culture, the color green had three potential symbolic meanings. It did not mean money, because back then money was gold and silver. They had no paper money back then. It often referred to nature, and you see they're often referring to nature in these descriptions. Green is the grass, such as that. Another thing green was associated with was magic. Green and magic. In a lot of stories, you'll see either blue or often green fire associated with magical beings. It's just a motif they like to use. Thirdly, green was associated with the devil. I know in artwork you often think of like red demons being drawn in paintings, drawings, but back then they thought more of green with the devil. So those three potential meanings, nature, magic, devil. Think about all of them as we read about the Green Knight, and think about how they all kind of apply in their own way, all those meanings. But moving on, the Green Knight's greeting has been met with silence, and he's going to take it as fear. Chapter 12. Then Arthur before the high dais beheld this wonder, and freely with fair words, for fearless was he ever, saluted him, saying, Lord, to this lodging thou art welcome. The head of this household, Arthur my name is. Alight as thou lovest me, and linger, pray thee, and what may thy wish be in a while? We shall learn. So he tells him, hey, come sit a spell and have some food and drink, and whatever you want, we'll get to it, but have some food first, relax, chill. He's being hospitable to this guest, even though he is uninvited and kind of rude so far, still trying to be nice. Nay, so help me, quoth the horseman. He that on high is throned to pass any time in this place was no part of my errand. But since thy praises, prince, so proudly are uplifted, and thy castle and courtiers are accounted the best, the stoutest in steel gear that on steeds may ride, most eager and honorable of the earth's people, valiant to vie within other virtuous sports, and here in knighthood renowned, as is noised in my ears, 'tis that has fetched me hither by my faith at this time. You may believe by this branch, this holly branch, that I am bearing here that I pass as one in peace, no peril seeking. For had I set forth to fight in fashion of war, I have a hauberk at home, and a helmet also, a shield and a sharp spear shining brightly, and other weapons to wield too, as well I believe. But since I crave for no combat, my clothes are softer. Yet if thou be so bold, as abroad is published, thou wilt grant of thy goodness the game that I ask for by right. So notice here, the Green Knight has labored to say that he comes in peace. He says, look at the holly branch that I hold, that is symbolic of peace. Look at my clothes, they're soft, so I come in peace. I could have worn armor. I don't have weapons except for this axe. I come in peace. So peace, 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 peace. And then hear what Arthur says here. Then Arthur answered there and said, Sir noble knight, if battle thou seekest thus bear, thou fail not here to fight. So after peace, 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 Arthur's like, so you want to fight? Is that it? It's like he wasn't listening. It's like he wants to fight. And this is one of the things the author is trying to dig into, is that maybe Arthur and his knights were too eager for bloodshed, too eager for violence and battle, especially at Christmas and New Year's time, which I never heard of Christmas being the season for killing people. You know, it's usually for good things, not for the killing. So of all times of the year, probably bad taste. But Arthur's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's fight. Let's see what the Green Knight says. Chapter 13. Nay, because he's a horse, I guess. Nay, I wish for no warfare. On my word, I tell thee, hereabout on these benches are but beardless children. Were I hasped in armor on my high charger, there is no man here to match me. Their might is so feeble. So notice, he says he comes in peace, but he says it in a darn insulting way. He says, no, I'm not here to fight. You know, I only fight men, and I only see children here. So no, I don't come to fight. There's what he's saying, and then there's definitely the trying to provoke a fight barely beneath the surface here. It's barely veiled at all. He's saying that, yeah, that none of them can match me. So no, I come in peace. And so I crave in this court only a Christmas pastime. He only wants to play a game. It's never creepy when magical people roll up one to play a game. Nothing creepy there at all. Since this is Yule and New Year, and you here are young and merry, if any be so hardy in this house, here holds that he is. If so bold be his blood, or his brain be so wild, that he stoutly dare strike one stroke for another, then I will give him as my gift this gizzarm costly, this axe, 'tis heavy enough to handle as he pleases. And I will abide the first brunt, here bare as I sit. If any fellow be so fierce as my faith to test, hither let him haste to me, and lay hold of this weapon. I hand it over forever. He can have it as his own. And I will stand one stroke from him, stock still on this floor, provided thou lay down this law, that I may deliver him another, claim I, and yet a respite I'll allow, till a year and a day go by. Come quick, and let's see now, if any here dare reply. So, The Green Knight says, but if any of you are so brave, if any of you are brave enough to play my game, so he's goading them further, here's my game. Take this axe and hit me with it. I'll stay still and let you hit me with it so you can't miss. But in a year and a day, I get to give you the same blow that you give me, the same hit of the axe that you give me, I will give back to you in a year and a day. So that's a weird game. You know, he didn't bring Yahtzee or charades to Christmas. He brought decapitation, potentially, killing, axes. So that's a fun game there. Oh, and you get to keep the axe as a prize, whatever happens. So you might have concluded by now, by his description of being green, by the author using such word choices as fey, phantom, white, that this is probably a magical being. Probably has some sort of ace up his sleeve. Taking this deal might be unwise. There have been several red flags so far, but they're not seeing the red flags. They're seeing red, but they're not seeing the red flags. He's got them angry on purpose. And of course, think of what that does to your decision-making abilities. For chapter 14, if he astounded them at first, yet stiller were then. And all the household in the hall, both high men and low, the man on his mount moved in his saddle, and rudely his red eyes he rolled then about, bent his bristling brows all brilliantly green. That's a beautiful alliteration there. And swept round his beard to see who would rise, when none in converse would accost him. He coughed then loudly, stretched himself haughtily, and straightway exclaimed, "What is this Arthur's house?" said he thereupon, "the rumor of which runs through the realms unnumbered? Where now is your haughtiness, your high conquests, your fierceness and fell mood, your fine boasting? Now are the revels and the royalty of the Round Table overwhelmed by the word of one man spoken? For all blench now abashed, ere a blow is offered." So he basically laughs at them, mocks them, tells them, "Oh, you guys are afraid of just one guy and some words? Man, I thought this was King Arthur's house, the bravest knights in the land. My bad, I must be mistaken." And then he laughs in their faces. With that he laughed so loud that their lord was angered. The blood shot for shame into his shining cheeks and face. As wroth as wind he grew, so all did in that place. Then near to the stout man drew, that king of fearless race. So if the Green Knight's goal was to get them angry, mission accomplished. Here. Chapter 15, and said, "Marry, good man, 'tis madness thou seekest, and since folly thou hast sought, thou deservest to find it. I know no lord that is alarmed by thy loud words here. Give me now thy gizzarm, in God's name, sir, and I will bring thee the blessing thou hast begged to receive." Quick then he came to him, and caught it from his hand. Then the lordly man loftily alighted on foot. Now Arthur holds his axe, and the haft grasping, sternly he stirs it about, his stroke considering. The stout man before him, there stood his full height, higher than any in that house by a head and yet more. With stern face as he stood, he stroked his beard, and with expression impassive he pulled down his coat, no more disturbed or distressed at the strength of his blows than if someone, as he sat, had served him a drink of wine. From beside the Queen Gawain to the king did then incline, I implore, with prayer plain, that this match should now be mine. So notice King Arthur says, okay, all right. No one's hesitating because they're afraid. They're hesitating because this is a stupid game, and there's no stupid people here to play your stupid game, Green Knight. But I'll play your game if it'll shut you up. So give me the axe. Let's do it. Let's do this. And he's all in favor of doing this now. He's going forward. He is eager to swing this axe to kill somebody here in the Christmas New Year's days. Quite eager. And notice the Green Knight is not afraid. He kneels down, bares his neck. It describes him as not as undistressed as if someone has just served drink and wine. So as if someone came by your table at a restaurant, refilled your sweet tea, and you're like, thanks. That's his mood right now. He is completely nonchalant, calm, like nothing important is going on. And then someone speaks up, our title character, Gawain, and says, no, let me do this. Let's find out why. Chapter 16. Would you, my worthy lord, said Gawain to the king, bid me abandon this bench and stand by you there, so that I, without discourtesy, might be excused from the table, and my liege lady were not loath to permit me? I would come to your council before your courtiers fair, for I find it unfitting, as in fact it is held, when a challenge in your chamber makes choice so exalted. Though you yourself be desirous to accept it in person, while many bold men about you on bench are seated, on earth there are, I hold, none more honest of purpose. No figures fairer on field where fighting is waged. I am the weakest, I am aware, in wit the feeblest, the least loss, if I live not, if one would learn the truth. Only because you are my uncle is honor given to me. Save your blood in my body, I boast of no virtue. And since this affair is so foolish that it no wise befits you, I have requested it first. Accord it then to me. If my claim is uncalled for, without cavil shall judge this court. To consult the knights draw near, and this plan they all support. The king with crown to clear, and give Gawain the sport. So Gawain makes the case that, king, this is unworthy of you. Let someone less important do this. I am the least important on your round table, so if something happens, I'm the least lost. He also says, I didn't get this job because I'm one of the bravest knights in the land, like all your other round table knights here. I got it because I was your nephew, and I'd really like a chance to prove myself here, so it should be me to do this. And all the knights talk, and they're like, yep, should be Gawain. So they're eager to throw him under the bus here and say, yeah, okay, let him do it. Sure. None of them are volunteering. It's always fun. They're supposed to be brave, though. Chapter 17. The king then commanded that he quickly should rise, and he readily uprose and directly approached, kneeling humbly before his highness, and laying hand upon the weapon. And he lovingly relinquished it, and lifting his hand, gave him God's blessing, and graciously enjoined him, that his hand and his heart should be hearty alike. Take care, cousin, quoth the king. Not literally his cousin, it's his nephew, but back then they just said that cousin, cuz. Here and in Shakespeare, they just often address their friends that way. One cut to address, and if thou learnest him his lesson, I believe very well that thou wilt bear any blow that he gives back later. So Arthur whispers in his nephew's ear that if you swing well enough, you won't have to worry about that swing later, indicating that you should just kill him. Make sure it's a fatal wound. Because theoretically, if he's dead, he won't be able to do anything. Gawain goes to the great man with Gizarm in hand, and he boldly abides there. He blenched not at all. Then next said to Gawain, the knight all in green, let's tell again our agreement ere we go any further. I'd know first, sir knight, thy name. I entreat thee to tell it to me truly, that I may trust in thy word. In good faith, quoth the good knight, I Gawain am called, who bring thee this buffet. Let be what may follow, and at this time a 12-month in thy turn, have another with whatever weapon thou wilt, and in the world with none else but me. The other man answered again, I am passing pleased, said he, upon my life, Sir Gawain, that this stroke should be struck by thee. So notice the magical green man has Gawain reiterate all the words of the deal, every letter of the deal before agreeing to it. If you've ever read it or any other stories, watched any movies or TV shows where people make deals with magical beings that are sticklers for the exact wording of a deal, does that ever go well? Is that usually a good thing? It usually deals with genies or jinn, demons, Rumpelstiltskin in one case. Either way, the trend is that it doesn't. But maybe Gawain's never read those books. So, moving forward. 18, chapter 18. Begad, which is an old version of by God, said the Green Knight. Sir Gawain, I am pleased to find from thy fist the favor I asked for. And thou hast promptly repeated and plainly hast stated, without abatement, the bargain I begged of the king here. Save that thou must assure me, sir, on thy honor, that thou wilt seek me thyself, search where thou thinkest I may be found, near or far, and fetch thee such payment as thou deliverest me today before these lordly people. Where should I light on thee, quoth Gawain? Where look for thy place? I have never learned where thou livest, by the Lord that made me. I know thee not, knight, thy name nor thy court, but teach me the true way. Tell me what men call thee, and I will apply all my purpose the path to discover. And that I swear thee for certain and solemnly promise. So Gawain asks a reasonable question before agreeing. He says, if I'm to meet you in a year and a day, can I find out what your name is and where you live? Your address of sorts. Could you tell me those things? And the Green Knight's answer is a bit suspicious. That is enough in New Year. There is no need of more, said the great man in green to Gawain the courtly. If I tell thee the truth of it, when I have taken the knock, and thou handily hast hit me, if in haste I announce then my house and my home and mine own title, then thou canst call and inquire, and keep the agreement. And if I waste not a word, thou'lt win better fortune. For thou mayst linger in thy land, and look no further. But stay, to thy grim tool now take heed, sir. Let us try thy knocks today. Gladly, said he, indeed, sir. And his axe he stroked at play. So the Green Knight's response is, I'm not going to tell you my name or where I live until after you've already played the game, until you are already bound by the deal. I'll tell you after the fact. It's kind of like a blank check here. Agreeing to something without knowing all of the details is rarely a good idea, but he's going forward, because remember, anger going forward with hasty decisions here. Chapter 19. The Green Knight on the ground now gets himself ready, leaning a little. With the head he lays bare the flesh. His locks long and lovely he lifts over his crown, letting the naked neck, as was needed, appear. His left foot on the floor before him placing, Gawain gripped on his axe, gathered and raised it. From aloft he let it swiftly land where 'twas naked, so that the sharp of the blade shivered the bones, and sank clean through the clear fat, and clove it asunder. And the blade of the bright steel then bit into the ground. The fair head to the floor fell from the shoulders, and folk fended it with their feet, as forth it went rolling. The blood burst from the body, bright on the greenness, and yet neither faltered nor fell the fierce man and all, but stoutly he strode forth, still strong on his shanks, and roughly he reached out among the rows that stood there, caught up his comely head and quickly upraised it, and then hastened to his horse, laid hold of the bridle, stepped into stirrup iron, and strode up aloft, his head by the hair in his hands holding. And he settled himself then in the saddle as firmly as if unharmed by mishap, though in the hall he might wear no head. His trunk he twisted round, that gruesome body bled, and many fear then found, as soon as his speech was sped. So Gawain cleaves through the Green Knight's neck, hits the ground with a ting, and the head rolls down the aisle. People kick the head away because, ooh, goopy bleeding head, nasty, get that away from me. And the Green Knight, as is probably no surprise to you at this point, stands up, picks his head back up by the hair, and gazes at everyone with his severed head to creep them out on purpose. Or as if to say, see, yeah, I'm still alive. What do you think of that? His torso is gushing blood here like a bad horror movie, but he's just standing there, looking at him, unfazed, as if nothing has happened. 'Tis but a flesh wound. Also, this might call up an image of jack-o'-lanterns, because at this time in England and Ireland, jack-o'-lanterns were not made with pumpkins. They were made with turnips. So if you hold a turnip by the leaves and have the little head carved into the turnip, it's kind of like what you're seeing here with the Green Knight holding his head by his hair. And now he's about to speak through his severed head. Wonderful. Chapter 20. For the head in his hands he held it up straight toward the fairest at the table. He twisted the face, and it lifted up its eyelids, and looked at them broadly, and made such words with his mouth as may be recounted. See thou get ready, Gawain, to go as thou vowest, and as faithfully seek till thou find me, good sir, as thou hast promised in this place, in the presence of these knights. To the Green Chapel go thou, and get thee, I charge thee, such a dint as thou hast dealt. Indeed, thou hast earned a nimble knock in return on New Year's morning. The Knight of the Green Chapel I am known to many. So if to find me thou endeavor, thou fail not to do so. Therefore come, or be called a craven, thou deservest. With a rude roar and rush his reins he turned then, and hastened out through the hall door with his head in his hand. Fire on the flint flew from the feet of his charger. To what country he came, in that court no man knew, no more than they had learned from what land he had journeyed. Meanwhile, the king and Sir Gawain at the Green Man laugh and smile. Yet to men who had appeared, 'twas plain, a marvel beyond denial. So the Green Knight reminds him, "Thanks, that was a good hit. Good job, man. Good job. But remember, you're in a day. I get to give you the same hit you gave me. I am the Green Knight. I come from the Green Chapel. There's your name and address, so find me. Ask around. People know about me. Come in a year and a day, or be called a coward." And he rides off. Now, you might wonder, who cares? Why would he care about being called a coward? Could just stay and keep his life, as a logical decision would have it. But remember, he is a knight. He must adhere to his chivalry. He has given his word in front of all the knights of King Arthur's court that he would do this. Thus, to break it would be to break his word. Also, you can't run from a fight in chivalry. He'd be doing that as well. So, long story short, he'd be breaking his chivalry and losing his knighthood if he didn't do this. He wouldn't die. He wouldn't be killed or executed or anything, but he wouldn't be a knight anymore. So to them, their honor is quite important. It's what the knights are supposedly all about. Notice the end of this chapter, though. He and King Arthur laugh at this. It's like, oh yeah, that was entertaining. Good job. That's great. King Arthur's like, oh yeah, I can finally eat dinner now. That was an adventurous story. Yeah, I was entertained. Chapter 21. And I think we will end with chapter 21 for this video. Though Arthur the High King in the heart marveled, he let no sign of it be seen, but said then aloud to the queen so comely, with courteous words, "Dear lady, today be not downcast at all. Such cunning play well becomes the Christmas tide. Interludes and the like, and laughter and singing, amid these noble dances of knights and of dames. None the less to my food I may fairly betake me, for a marvel I have met, and I may not deny it." So he puts on a good show of confidence, saying, "Ah, that was entertaining. Yeah, that was great. I can eat now." But then he has an aside to Gawain that shows he's actually concerned here. He glanced at Sir Gawain, and with good point he said, "Come, hang up thine axe, sir. It is hewn enough." And over the table they hung it on the tapestry behind, where all men might remark it. A marvel to see, and by its true token might tell of that adventure. Then to a table they turned, those two lords together, the king and his good kinsman, and courtly men served them with all dainties double the dearest there might be, with all manner of meats, and with minstrelsy, too. With delight that day they led, till to the land came the night again. Sir Gawain, now take heed, lest fear make thee refrain from daring the dangerous deed that thou in hand hast taken. And that's where we'll pause. We'll pick up again with part 2 or fit 2 in the next video. Take care and happy reading.